All right. So today is Thursday, February 11th, 2021. My name is Colin Goldberg, and I'm here today with artist Devonte Bradley, otherwise known as Davo.
Hello, hello. Glad to be
Hey,
here.
Davo. Good to have you here. So, I guess we'll get right into it. But first, just a quick intro. Davo was one of the first people to get involved with the Texpressionism project, and it was actually, I put it out there on Instagram, sort of, as an idea for people to start using the hashtag, and had some information up on the site. And Davo was one of the first people to respond and to sort of message me that he really identified with the concept. So he's been really instrumental in helping tech expressionism grow, and acted as the moderator for our salons. So with that, I'm going to introduce Davo, and I guess the first question would be for you to tell us a little bit about your background in terms of like where you were born, where you live and practice now, and any sort of cultural influences that you want to talk about.
All right. I'm gonna actually try to have to catch myself because I have a tendency to talk a lot now, which didn't always used to be the case, but that's how it is now. Anyway, so I was born in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I lived there till I was 6 years old. Um, then after my dad left, his parents separated, we moved down to Georgia, which I was there from 6 to 17 pretty much. And then when I went off to college, I came back to Virginia, um, pretty kind of close to Central Virginia. And I met my wife in college. And when that all happened, I was like, you know what, I might as well stay because I wasn't really tethered to Georgia all that much. And I always wanted to come back to Virginia. So now I'm living in Richmond, Virginia, where my little studio is my little dark corner of the house.
And what did you go to school for?
I actually was originally in school for I was a double major. I was a philosophy and computer science double major. I dropped the computer science over differences of opinion with the head of the department and one of the major professors, and we kind of had a falling out. And I kind of got disillusioned. And I was like, you know what? I don't need this. Um, I actually wanted to leave that college because this college was it's a small private all male liberal arts college in the middle of Virginia, completely unlike anything I had ever experienced before, and it was also predominantly white, so that affluent white kids. It was crazy. I remember moving in somebody that they pulled up in a Rolls Royce and their dad pulled up in a Bentley. And as I was
Wow.
like helping them unpack and unload, I was like, oh dear God, I hope I don't break anything because that's my life.
What college was it?
This is Hampden Sydney College.
Huh.
Yeah, it's one of three all-male colleges left in the country. One of them is a HBCU back in Georgia called Morehouse, and I think there's one in Washington called Wabash. I think it's in Washington. Don't quote me on that. I think it's over there, but yeah, there's only three all-male colleges, mainstream colleges left. Yeah, that's where I went to school, studied philosophy. Did not take a single art course there. Didn't take a single art course in high school, but I did buy my first drawing tablet, my first Wacom drawing tablet, after I got my first job, and started experimenting with digital art then. But at that time, I wanted to be a character artist or a video game concept artist. So that's what I was more or less practicing for. That's kind of the goal I had in mind. Even though I wasn't going to school for it, I was like, this was always in the back of my mind, like, this is what I want to do. And going to that college was kind of, I don't know, in a way, kind of to appease my mom for one, and also at the same time escape from home because home life wasn't that great. So it was like, I'm biding my time here doing this stuff while I try to work on my other stuff. Um, but after graduation, after I graduated my singular degree in philosophy, for a long time I kind of went on hiatus with pursuing art wise. Kind of got very unmotivated and just I wasn't feeling it anymore. Like the hours I was spending, I was learning a lot. My technique was going up, but the passion had kind of just faded away. It's like there was a moment where I was just like, I want to create, but I don't think I want to create this anymore. And so like as a like video games and that kind of stuff was a major part of my life for a very long time, and I always thought that that's something that I want to get into or something that I should be in. And then it just kind of fizzled out.
Mm.
But it didn't take. I had always kind of played around the idea of being like a fine artist. Always played around with the idea, but it was something that I didn't think was viable for me, especially considering I had pursued more digital approach. And as far as I knew, there were no digital artists out there that had kind of made it as a fine artist. Like none of the galleries online, none of the communities online. The digital artists that were out there, they were like commercial artists, like they were doing art for video games, art for movies and that kind of stuff. So I didn't think that there was a space for digital fine artists. Like I didn't think that was the thing, even though that was something that I wanted to do, something that I had dabbled in a few times, but not extensively because again, I just didn't think it was worth it. It didn't take till the pandemic where I had all this time on my hands because I lost my job, where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna throw all of myself into this because I don't have anything else going on. I'm at home all the time. I have the computer, I have my tablet. Why not just try to make something happen? If not be the first person, be one of the first persons to try and make this happen. And yeah, that's kind of how you found me. Like when I first started posting on Instagram, some of my first works that started to produce that year, and I
I'm
remember.
wondering like how, if it was that maybe something of yours showed up when I was searching on a hashtag. I think that's probably what it was when I was originally looking for artists, I would search on hashtags like digital art, digital fine
Mm-hmm.
art, stuff like that. I think that's probably how I first came across your work, and then, we've been using sort of a hashtag strategy as far as encouraging people to use the hashtag to expressionism to then show up on on our searches to locate, and that's how the majority of artists have been
Mm-hmm.
located, for the artist index. But yeah, it's interesting, and then definitely like I felt like when you like I think I saw your work, and then I sent you a message like, hey, like check out this site, and like
Yep.
we've been using this hashtag to try to put a group together, and afterwards, after you checked it out, I think you were like, wow, like I totally identify with this
Yep.
idea of, using technology in a fine art context to sort of express emotion,
Yep.
and that like when, I mean, you were like a total stranger, and somebody like, responding in that way really gave me a lot of confidence to say, you know what, like this is sort of like an area of interest for people that it hasn't found, like, it hasn't been answered at this point, and I
Yeah, 'cause-
definitely felt like when I was doing like when I did my MFA in computer art, and this is like back in 2007, almost all of the undergraduate students in the digital art program were interested in industry. There were
yeah.
almost none of them that really, other than for class assignments and stuff like that, had any sort of interest in pursuing the direction of putting their work in a gallery context or a museum
Mm-hmm.
context or making work basically for its own sake. I wouldn't even
Right.
say about the context, more like why is it made, for personal expressive reasons,
Yep.
versus to to satisfy like a market need, so like that was
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool, it was you, and then Mark Peklavanos, like you two guys were like the first two people I remember adding to the index, like that first day that I added, that was, you two were like the first artists outside of the initial sort of group of like me, Patrick, Steve, Oz, and Helen that we met up and sort of started kicking ideas around. So that was a real formative moment, you know, and it's interesting. Like, and I know you mentioned you were a philosophy major. Like, are there any aspects of like your studies there that you feel like have influenced you or influenced your thinking artistically at all?
Actually, yeah, quite a bit. The thing about studying philosophy is that like it's teaching you how to look at ideas and examine ideas closely. And a lot of those techniques and critical thinking skills I've applied to myself introspectively. So when I'm thinking about my thoughts, my feelings, or my experiences, I'm kind of using that to inform uh, what ends up on my virtual canvas, so to speak. Because it took me a minute to realize that what was going on though, as I was creating, because for a while I didn't really think too hard about what my work was about. Like I knew I was expressing something, but I wasn't sure it was always emotion. But when I thought a little bit deeper about it, it's like, yeah, my work, like the vast majority of my work, I will say probably 99.9% of my work probably is about emotions. And because at the forefront of my mind, it was a lot of this work is influenced by trauma because a lot of this work speaks to something that I was going through at the time, or me remembering what I was feeling going through that time. But it's more about the emotion, um, and like that slew of black and white abstracts that I did. All of those are about fun and enjoyment because that was what I was feeling at the time I was creating them, because I had kind of recaptured that feeling from my childhood of working in MS Paint, creating artwork through that. And so it was really fun. Like I remember telling my wife, like after I had done like 20 pieces, like back to back, like the whole day, I was just churning them out. And I was like, holy crap, that was really fun. And that was not a feeling that I had felt in a long time when I was
Mm,
creating something. Like it just when I was working on character art or trying to do concept art, that feeling just wasn't there. It felt like a chore. It felt too much like work that I wasn't getting paid for too. So that was also the thing. Like the hours I was pouring into it, there was just I wasn't getting a whole lot out of it. Like it felt not necessarily wasted, but I was like, I feel like I could be using my energy somewhere else and get something more out of this.
mhm,
So, um,
mm,
and if you've seen my work, like it's the style itself has developed very rapidly. Like if
mhm,
you look at
mhm.
some of my first work compared to some of the stuff I'm making now, it is literally night and day. The styles, like the
Right.
what it's about is more or less the same, but the style is completely different now.
Mhm. I
Um,
mean, do you feel like that from just the standpoint of technical skills and stuff like that, that the commercial work or, you know, working towards developing that sort of skill set has enabled you to express yourself, you know, with more facility as, you know, in terms of your personal practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I know the term like self-taught artist goes around quite a bit, but I don't think that's necessarily accurate. Not for me anyway. Like I'm self-taught insofar as I was the one that sought out specific resources, specific
Mhm.
tutorials, specific guidelines, and learned from those people how to do some of the work I did. And a lot of
Mhm.
stuff that I learned working on like the concept art stuff and the character art design. Like I might not be using anatomy too much these days, but
Right.
like just the being able to play with lighting and shadows, color theory, um, general composition theory, all that stuff. I've incorporated that into my new work,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
it's a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah,
It's a
I
lot more
mean, I
enjoyable this way.
definitely I relate to that too in terms of like, you know, I mean, I spent a lot of time and then I still to some degree do some commercial work, but you know, when I was getting involved in in digital tools, like the majority of the work that I learned on was commercial work, like commercial design work and some to some degree illustration, but
Yeah.
mostly online stuff or interactive media. And and again, I would say, I was self-taught in the sense that I would either buy a book or
Yeah.
look up tutorials. It was definitely nothing that I learned in a classroom setting. And in fact, as an undergrad, my professors for any kind of design classes that I took had no idea how to use any of the software, and it was the TAs that basically showed us like the rudimentary aspects of like Photoshop and Illustrator and things like that. So,
These are
but
layers. This is opacity.
totally, totally. But then, like once you're doing it for someone else with an end result in mind, then when it comes to just drawing something, you you have the ability to create something now that, you wouldn't necessarily have had the ability to do before you went through all this sort of other work that
Right.
isn't so satisfying or fulfilling.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely, I relate a lot to that sort of trajectory as well. So I mean, what was it that made you want to become an artist, or like, or when did you know that this is what you sort of wanted to do?
It's honestly, it's been something that has been with me my entire life, just about going all the way back to like early childhood. I would draw, and I had crayon in my hand making. Well, apparently, according to my mother and several other people that knew me back then, they're like my style was very reminiscent of Cubism, like even to the point of being similar to Picasso. And I was like, I don't know who those people are, but I'm making stuff. But and I even took that into like MS Paint and was doing similar stuff in MS Paint with, you know, as basic as that is, because that doesn't have layers or anything like that. What you see is what you get. You get colors, you get a paintbrush, pixels, that's it. But I was even creating stuff back then that was eye-catching and was making people like notice.
Mm,
And something happened where because my brother and my sister, they were into comic books and cartoons and stuff, and naturally I also became interested in those things too. And then they started drawing those things. I was like, oh, I'm going to be like them too, and I'm going to start drawing those things. So I started drawing like X-Men and Sailor Moon and Pokemon and all this stuff. And then it didn't stop. Like
mm,
I kept on that trajectory even after they stopped. Like I don't remember the last time that either of my siblings made anything like that. But even after they stopped, I didn't. So I was still drawing Pokemon. I was still drawing these characters from these shows that we enjoyed and that kind of stuff, and video games later on. And that's where I kind of saw myself going. And it took, like, I was playing with the idea of creating video games, which is something I still want to do. Like, I still want to make a video game in my life. Like, there's a specific game that I actually want to remake in my own kind of image that I want to do. But that's some point in the future. But I thought I really wanted to work in video games. Like, this is where I saw myself being. This is where I thought my passion was. And I thought that way for a long time. Like I knew I wanted to do art, something in the video game world. Didn't know what, so I kind of was like concept art or character art because I like making characters. And then later on, after years of plugging away at this and not feeling fulfilled or satisfied with what I was learning, like I was learning a lot, but just in the back of my mind, it's like this may not be the path for me. It's like because it was feeling so much like a chore that I didn't want to do. Like even learning more things was seemingly like a chore. It's like I don't want to learn how to do this anymore. Like, oh yeah, your background work could use work. It's like yeah, I don't want to work on that right now. So, but again, like the whole idea of me wanting to create art, me wanting to create, that had been there all throughout that time period, all the way through elementary school, middle school, high school, college. That idea was still there. And again, it wasn't until recently that I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I may not know how to actually paint traditionally. Like I don't even actually remember the last time I held an actual paintbrush. I don't even think I've ever actually, no, I have never actually painted on a canvas. I can say that. I've never actually painted on a canvas before. All of my work for the past 15 something odd years, for the most part, has been either digitally or pencil and paper. That's it. Like no canvas, nothing, no paints, nothing like that. So I don't know, and I guess I felt,
What was it that like, I mean, was there like basically a day, like, I mean, you mentioned that you had like lost your job and you didn't seem to really be that bent about it, like maybe you
nah,
didn't like it so much or whatever.
I
But
was
I
a
mean,
targeted
like, did
manager.
you have like, a day where you're just like, you know what, like I'm just gonna like make some art, like, or like, did you like, was there something that happened that made you like had like a decision that you made consciously, or how did that happen?
There was a point, because video games still a major part of my life. I was streaming. I was streaming. I think it might have been Monster Hunter or something. What One of the games I was normally played around that time.
Like on
Um,
Twitch or something like that, you
yeah,
mean? Or
yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of actually why I have the setup that I have, like with the mic and the ring light and all that good stuff. And um, but there was a point at the end of one of my streams where I was like, you know what? I haven't drawn anything for a while, but I don't know what I want to draw. And so I booted up. Um, I think at the time I was using a program called Paint Toolside, which was my go-to program for the time. This was before I discovered Krita was a thing that existed, and I fell in love with Krita after that. But I created, like, I was just moving my stylus across the canvas, and it's like whatever develops is going to develop. Like I didn't have I didn't have a clear vision in mind for how it was going to turn out. I was just making whatever and seeing how it went. And by the end of it, or by midway through, I was like, huh, that kind of looks like something. Let me adjust here, adjust here. And what I ended up with was this really abstract looking eye at the end of it. And it surprised me. I was like, that actually looks pretty damn amazing. And I spent literally 5 minutes on it. Like I got more of a positive feeling from that 5 minutes and the end result of that than I had with like the 12 hours I would spend on average sometimes with some of the other work that I made.
hmm
And it was just the moment, it was like, it's like, maybe I should try that again. And so I kind of had the same strategy where it's like I just took my stylus and was just kind of moving. I picked a brush, started moving it around, and see what would happen. And I was like, ah.
Now you said you were streaming this. Like, were you actually getting feedback from people, from viewers, like while you were
Um,
doing this, or
yeah,
like, you know?
my friends, they were like, "Holy crap, what did you do?" I was like, "I don't know. It just happened. Like it literally, I can't explain it. Like it just happened. Like
hmm
I wasn't really had a conscious. There wasn't really a thought process behind it. I was just making lines, and or well, not even lines in that case. It was like a brush that I picked up, but
hmm
and then like the next time, like I think it was like about maybe a week or so in between that. But I was like, you know what, maybe I should try this again. So I started streaming again, and I was like, I'll make this an art stream. Like that's all I'm gonna do this time. And I remember I made something there that it kind of looked like a forest, but I wasn't too like thrilled with how it came out. Like but I wasn't exactly like upset or like it, even though it wasn't something that like I was necessarily proud of, so to speak. I could actually walk away from that piece and like, no, that's done, it's finished. I don't have to work at anything, like I can walk away. And there was something about that that was kind of liberating, I guess. It's like, even though I wasn't completely satisfied, it was still actually a pleasant experience to work on, and it's done. And that wasn't something that I had really felt before. And the next time that I did it, like I started experimenting more, started trying to express different things. And it just, all this experimentation, all this like just having fun creating spiraled into what I've created now and what I've been creating now. It's actually kind of, I don't know, I guess it was like a natural progression, I guess. Just
Right on. I mean, do you
rediscovering myself.
have any like specific influences on your work, like that were artists that you admired, or?
Um, so one thing that I made the conscious decision to do when I set out to develop the style that I have now, for a long time, like when I was working the character art and stuff, and concept art, I felt that my work had been influenced too much by other people. And I didn't feel like I had a style of my own to speak. It's like, because I had worked so long using these other people as references, it didn't feel like something that was uniquely me. And so I made a conscious effort. I was like, while I'm working on this, while I'm doing this stuff, I don't want to necessarily draw too much from other people. I don't want to draw too much from other influence. Not yet, anyway. Not in this phase where everything is still fun, everything is still enjoyable. Um, and so I, for about maybe 3-4 weeks of just working solely on me, what I wanted to see, what I wanted to create, without looking at something else. Because one of the feelings that came about from working the way that I did, it was like, this doesn't have to look like anything. Like, I don't have to make this look like something else that already exists. I don't have to, unless I really want to. And because of that, that's kind of what's it felt really freeing, because by the end of it, when something is done, when it's finished, it's like, it looks like itself. It doesn't look like this, it doesn't look like that, it's just, it is what it is itself.
Right.
And of course, we, as a creator, you can't necessarily like say you weren't inspired or you weren't influenced by something when you make something, because everything that we have, like we are kind of innately drawing from whatever references, but I can't pinpoint a specific reference or things that I was pulling from and creating what I was creating. It's like, and I think that's kind of the distinction between like creating my own style versus like being inspired by somebody like Picasso or things like that. Now, the work that you see now, that's, some of that stuff is definitely influenced by some modern artists, because I actually started studying Basquiat a lot. I was very, I felt very strongly about his story and his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noted that in quite a few of his pieces, there was writing, like legitimate writing text, like even something that could be seen as poetry, but not necessarily actually poetry, in a lot of his work. And so I took that idea and some of the symbolism, like the crown that he liked to use in quite a few of his works. I put that in a couple of paintings as like, this is me respecting you in my work. Um, and but there was quite a few works that I did that there were my thoughts, my feelings, kind of like, I'm going to coin it now as like self graffiti. Because these are thoughts and feelings and stuff that I couldn't actually like just push away. Like, these were at the forefront of my mind. So it's like, this is what's being exposed on the canvas. So doesn't necessarily have to be rhyme or reason or any logic behind it, because emotion is kind of just irrational. That's just how it is.
Right.
So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool. Cool. Right on. Yeah. I mean, I know you mentioned Basquiat before, and I didn't, I definitely, I see the connection with using words, but other than that, stylistically, I don't see you like trying to emulate him in some way, you know what I
Nah.
mean? But and his story was definitely, something. I mean, sort of
Yeah.
tragic in a lot of ways, but I think that it just sort of speaks to the structure of the art world, the
Yeah.
way it was. And I feel like the way it is today is almost like an exaggerated version of the way it used to be. It's
Yeah.
like almost like a cartoon in a lot of ways, um, for better or worse, but so anyway, I guess before we look at your work, do you want to share a little bit about your process? I know you mentioned Krita. That was a software program that I had never even heard of before you brought it up. And actually, like, I mean, so what year were you born in?
92. 1992.
92.
Yep.
Okay, so I was born in 71. So like literally like I could be your dad, and
You
like
could, you could, you could be.
when like you talk about streaming and Twitch and stuff like that, and like that whole culture is definitely like not my culture, but it's
Right.
interesting and it's cool that like artists can actually be almost doing a live performance while they're creating work and people are like tuning in on the internet. Like that's something that's really sort of novel to me to even think about. Like I knew that was sort of
Hmm.
going on in terms of gaming, but I think that that is a new aspect of art making that sort of is really interesting. And also like I know that you basically introduced me to Discord, which we're using now as like sort of our main chat platform for the
Yeah.
expressionist community. And I think stuff like that, I mean, everybody brings different stuff to the table, you know what I mean? I think that
Hmm.
that's what's made this project sort of really interesting. And it starts to feel more and more like this idea of really like social sculpture, and that's like an idealized version of what I think that expressionism could be, and at the other pole of like what I definitely do not want it to be would be an organization with a trademark and sort of like
Yeah.
all of those sorts of things, like so to me, having it have the feel of, a collaborative sort of ongoing online project, like an art project in a sense, using social media and social structures in general as a medium to work in. I mean, I think I might have wrote a little bit about this on the site, but there's an artist, Joseph Boys, who came up with this idea of social sculpture. And Joseph Neckvital, who's one of the artists in our index, he introduced me to that concept years back, when we collaborated on something. And for some reason, it sort of laid dormant for a long time, and I never really connected it to what's happening here. But then seeing things like, like you took the initiative of like starting a collab um, project,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, it just, I don't know, like it makes it into something really interesting where it's stimulating, like to be
Hmm.
involved with so many different artists having different ways of looking at things. And it also makes it apparent that like everyone's going to have their own definition of whatever expressionism is for them, you know what I mean?
Right.
And to me, that's validity, like
Yeah.
that's what it should be. Other people might argue against that and feel like it all needs to conform to a certain agenda or look a certain way or whatever else like that. But to me, technology and expression are like the core components. And other than that, and and context, that it's not mass media, that it's
So
personal
it's
media.
I don't really mean to interrupt, but like there's a
No,
there's
no,
a
it's yours.
there's a point that you got at that really hits home for me. The idea that the movement itself manifests itself differently for everyone. Like there is kind of like this core idea of what it should be, right? But subjectively, everyone has their own like specific interpretation of how that should be or how that looks, right? And what it means to them. Now, why that resonates with me specifically, not just because of my artwork, but that's actually kind of a theme that I've actually kind of been exploring with my artwork as a Black person, which I could go on and on about this point, but the idea is that when people think about what it means to be Black, and specifically African American in this country, there's all sorts of different ideas and stereotypes and all sorts of just stuff out there about what that means. You ask any Black person that has actually kind of thought about this, they still will not be able to tell you what it actually means to be Black in this country. It's this nebulous thing that's like, it's really hard to pin down and define. But on some level, and as weird as it sounds, it's kind of like, I know it when I see it, but not really. And for me, like, because I'm light skinned, like I'm very light skinned, darn near white. I have blonde hair, I have blue eyes. I have a lot of physical features and traits that don't necessarily scream Black, but like my facial structure, my eyebrows, my hair texture, those are Black. My nose, my lips, all of that are Black features. But everything that's on top of that isn't necessarily Black. The way I speak, the way I conduct myself, like my mannerisms, a lot of those don't actually speak Black either, which, like, growing up, I've been told you might as well be white because I wasn't speaking AAVE. And for those that don't know, that's the formal linguistic way to say African American vernacular language. What's colloquially known as like Ebonics. When people speak ghetto, that's what they're referring to, AAVE. It is a official dialect. Anyway, but I don't use it. I can understand it, but I don't use it. I whatever dialect of English that I use, it's not that. And just because I didn't necessarily follow or fit into the boxes of, okay, this is kind of what it means to be a Black person, but there was some overlap into apparently what it means to be a white person. I kind of fell outside of both boxes because I was too white to be Black, but also too Black to be white. And it's a weird feeling and it's a weird experience to essentially be ostracized by two communities that, one, you're technically supposed to be a part of, and the other, they might not want anything to do with you anyway. But I don't know, there's this weird, there's among people like myself, not just like people that look like me, light-skinned Black people like me, there's this idea that being Black, what it means to be Black, is just different for everyone. The guys or the people that grew up liking non-stereotypically Black things, like if they were into anime and they were into video games, and they didn't like hip hop or they didn't like to dress urban. If they didn't like those things, they were kind of pushed out or pushed aside because they weren't being Black. And this movement, in a way, was kind of like, for me, it's almost like that same sort of issue where you're there, you want to be seen as a fine artist, you want to be respected for being a fine artist, but for whatever reason, like, because you don't neatly fit into those boxes of what it means to be a fine artist or like what it means to be like an industrial or commercial artist, and like just kind of the ire that some galleries might give, or some people even in the art world who kind of look down upon digital artists or people that use technology in their artwork. They're like, that's not real art or whatever. That feeling very much reminds me about my particular position in the world, in my community. And it resonates very, very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely relate to your, you know, the way that you're talking about um, feeling sort of not a part of. on either side or either box or whatever,
Yeah.
being of mixed ancestry myself,
Yeah.
and like, walking into synagogues or temples and people are like,
Are you
kind of
supposed to
looking at
be here?
me. Yeah, right. Like,
I had that happen at a
family,
family
you
reunion.
know.
I had that happen to me at a family. Like it's hard to describe, but there's that look that you get where it's like, are you sure you're supposed to be here? Like that's what the look is telling
Mm,
you, even though they're not
sure.
like outwardly voicing this, but that's the feeling that you get, and you
Hmm.
can't ignore it.
Yeah, and I mean, on my mom's side, I mean, my mom's of Japanese ancestry, and I mean, I haven't really been as exposed to straight up Japanese culture. Like, I've never been to Japan, but definitely I think there's part of that too, where like, if you're not fully Japanese on both sides of your bloodline, you're kind of looked at as like, I think there's even like a Japanese word for it. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like along those same lines. And I remember my wife's nephew, who's now my nephew, when she and I first started talking online. We met on an online dating site, years ago, and her nephew was like, "Oh, when are you gonna message that Japanese guy?" And now and then I actually like, it stuck with me, and I Googled it.
Yeah,
Of course, there's already a Facebook group. There was already a Facebook group called Japanese, which I thought was really funny. But like,
right.
I felt like, wow, that's like something I identify with.
But
you know.
that's the feeling I got when I finally found expressionism. I was like, oh wow, there's a thing, it exists,
Mm,
and
mhm,
I feel that I fit into this thing. It's like I felt like an outsider on so many fronts, and this is the one time where it's like, wow, that speaks to me. That like
mhm.
I think I could be a part of this.
Yeah, like your identification actually made me feel like, wow, this is something worth moving forward with. And
Yeah,
as time has gone on, there have been more and more people that, like, when I first, like, message them over Instagram. I mean, that's our main sort of platform for, like, just showing each other's work, whatever, interacting with the world or whatever, for better or
yeah,
worse. Like, I feel like there's been plenty of people that are like, like, I found my tribe, or like, this is like these are my people, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's
right.
pretty cool, like, I don't know, that's a good feeling. It gives me some satisfaction to know that, like, and I've definitely felt the same way that, dealers and gallerists, a lot of them, they're not going to really like, look at work that had anything to do with the computer as valid, or
Yeah,
as valid as work that doesn't or didn't. But I mean, really early on, for me anyway, like, when I was first studying painting and stuff like that, I sort of had this epiphany, like, like, I was basically born right around the same time as the personal computer, right when, like, I mean, I grew up with TRS 80s in the classroom, learning BASIC, or Apple IIs, even when I was in elementary school, and then had a Commodore. But pretty much around the same time I was born in '71, that's when, like, home computers were basically around the time being born. And I was thinking, like, it would be really stupid for me as an artist not to make this my life's work, because, like,
right.
down the road, people are going to look back and be like, in the late 20th century, computers became available to people, and,
Yeah,
like, artists always just use whatever tools are around for
yeah.
millennia, since human
Start with like
beings existed,
rocks. Rocks were available.
basically.
Cave was
So
available.
to
Yeah,
me, it's like, what am I really going to say with my paintbrush and my oil paints that's going to be brand new, compared to, like, what I can do with this machine, where it's like, half the time I'm like, wow, look at what that did,
yeah, right.
and
Yeah,
definitely, like, a lot of what you were saying about your process, like, that also resonated with me in terms of, like, just making stuff that you want to see, and it doesn't
mhm,
necessarily have to be related to anything in particular, related to someone else's work, but, like, just experimenting with the tools until there's something surprising on the screen. It's like,
yep,
wow, look at how that turned out.
right.
Um, so moving along, you want to share a little bit about your process. Um,
Uh, So
Or I mean, you could do it actually through the screen share too, if you want.
I could. Actually, let me open up Krita. That's the software that I use. And I will.
And that's KRITA, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I actually had never heard of that
Yeah.
that
So
program before I met you.
I actually did not learn about it until last year. But I had been using, I went from Photoshop to a tool called Paint Tool Sai, which is what I had used almost exclusively for like 6 years. And then I discovered that there was some limitations with Sai that I just wasn't like, I needed something more robust, because it was really basic and allowed me to do the things I want to do at the time. But to do more, I needed something else. And I discovered Krita because they build themselves as being like the premier digital painting program, like specifically replicating brushstrokes and all that stuff. And I was like, yes, I'm gonna try that. And one of the first days I used it, I was like, now I know what they mean by there. It's really great at replicating brushstrokes, because I didn't actually have to do a whole lot of like legwork to modify a brush or create my own in a lot of cases, because what they had to start with was already pretty great. Now I've since added and created my own brushes and that kind of stuff too, but I pretty much use what they have as templates and just modify a couple of those to suit my needs or suit the effects I'm looking for, and it's been a wrap since then. Let me go ahead and pull up Krita. Can you see it?
Yep.
All right. So one of the things that you will see the most out of me, there are two brushes that are brushes, but they're supposed to be like chrome ink pens. And if you've worked with a chrome ink pen, like they make, oh crap, hold on. At one size they look one way, but when you make, if you imagine like if you took a chrome ink pen and just made it like this big around and just started using something like that, that's kind of what's happening. Because I'll take the chrome ink pen brush and I'll make it that big, set it to black, I think for this one, and kind of makes its own like 3D effects with it, depending on how much pressure I apply and whether or not it connects to another line.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this, the other one, which there's even more lines involved. Like this one is a lot more feathery feeling. I'm not sure if you can actually tell the difference, but there's a different effect that happens with this one, because there's a lot more lines involved.
A bitmap graphic, or is it vector or bitmap, or like a combination?
Bitmap.
Gotcha.
All bitmap. So yeah, so this is kind of how that works.
That's interesting. I see like the sort of spider web pattern going on inside of there, inside the strokes.
Yeah. So, and then what I'll do from here, I'll usually create another layer on top of that one, switch to a watercolor kind of brush. And I'll go over that with, I like to use red a lot, so I'm gonna go over this with the red. Now, the programming doesn't always catch up as fast, so I have to kind of be patient sometimes as my processor kind of computes. But it turns a lot of that black or almost black to whatever color I'm painting over it.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates that kind of coloring effect. And then from here, actually, since I painted on the background layer, I made a mistake, but it's all right. I'll set this to multiply, create another layer behind this one, set that layer, set the brush, same brush to gray, and then paint behind it with the same watercolor brush. And what happens is the residual brush effects from the watercolor that was the color brush you get to see how that actually is affecting the surrounding canvas as you go over, well, go behind with gray, because it changes the gray to whatever hue or value that is on top of it.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if you can see it too much. There it is. Yeah. See, if I go outside, this edge is going to be gray, but if I come back, it's going to be red because that's where the red is sitting.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And
So
I think like so most of your work, other than the work that incorporates like letter forms and words, is purely abstract, right? I mean, it's
right.
sort of so and it's interesting. I remember being in critiques in school, and people, other students were saying, so what is your work about? And I usually would say it's about the process, and talking about like how the work was made, and that a lot of times people, well, that's not enough. That's not good enough. What is it really about? And I think at this point for me, um, it's not really for me to say, like when it's abstract work. I mean, the surrealists talked about this idea of automatic drawing, and just watching you make this piece as a demo makes me think of that idea of automatic drawing, like it's just sort of coming out of you, and
Yep.
you're not trying to represent anything necessarily, but that isn't to say that there isn't meaning behind it, or something isn't driving you to make this particular mark versus any other mark, or this particular color, or drawing it quickly or slowly. You know what I mean? Like I feel
Yeah.
like and people could say, well, what's the difference between automatic drawing and doodling? I mean, to me, the answer would be basically nothing. They're different explanations for the same thing, which is sort of accessing your subconscious
Yep.
to create marks, and I find that really interesting. And I think with computers, those marks have the capacity to do really surprising things.
They do. Actually, if you, because I'm zoomed in really close now, you can kind of see the difference between each
Hmm.
Chrome ink pen. See how that one's a lot, like, those are a lot smoother looking and a lot more wispy. And
Hmm.
the other brush, or the other Chrome ink pen, looks like that.
Hmm.
They're a lot more spread
Interesting.
out and distinct.
Did you ever have a program called Studio Artist?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know if it's made anymore, but you should check that out. It used to be made by a software company was called Synthetic with a K. And it was really interesting because it was one of the few programs, I think it might have been the only one that I had ever seen, that combined vector and bitmap together. So you'd be
Hmm.
doing vector marks, so it really wasn't eating up processor time, like it was all
Right.
vector based. But then it would apply like bitmap effects, and you could apply your bitmap effects afterwards to the
Ah,
marks, and then regenerate like the drawings in different styles and stuff like that. It was pretty cool, and you could even like vectorize video, and then apply effects to the vectorized frame by
oh
frame
wow.
animation video. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was an older. It was probably maybe 10 years ago that I even had that program. I don't think it would even work on my machine right now, but I'd be curious to see, because what you were doing, it reminded me of that in some ways. Um, so anyway, shop
Oh,
talk.
I forgot to also share. So there's one other thing that I do as far as my process goes. It doesn't really add anything to it, but, well, it doesn't add anything to the process, but it definitely adds to, I guess, the presentation of the artwork. And that's when I decide to use, it's a program or a piece of software called VDraw. And what I've done is I've created like a virtual avatar for myself and a virtual studio.
Oh, right. Yeah, you shared
Yeah,
some of those on your Instagram, I saw.
yeah. So hold on, let me actually set that up really quick. Krita. open. All right. And then I'm gonna throw this. Actually, you know what? I will. All right. Let's share my screen again. And this time I'm going to put it on. Actually, I'll just put it back over there. And I'll move VDraw over. And yeah, okay. So this software, pretty much anything that I do on my canvas is actually going to be, whoops. It's kind of hard to do at the same time because I will actually have to, hold on. I'll switch screens and that should probably do it. I'm having technical difficulties. That's weird. Oh, okay, there it is. All right. Okay, now it's on my primary desktop, so it's going to be mirroring everything that I'm doing in Krita. But everything that I'm doing in Krita, you can see it over here that my virtual avatar is doing. So all the marks that I make, you can see them in real time as though I'm actually painting and everything.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like it definitely ties in your interest, I think, in anime and character art, you know, and shows the process in an interesting way. Yeah, I've definitely never seen anything like that in terms of you know, watching the process with an avatar like that.
Yeah.
What did you use to create the avatar in?
There is, what's the name of that software? It's all, both of them are Japanese, funnily enough. I cannot actually remember the name of the software that I actually used to create the avatar off the top of my head. But the software that the avatar is in is called VDraw, which is built using the Unity platform, which is a platform you normally use to create video games.
Gotcha.
What I'll do.
Favorite anime artists or anime, you know, like titles?
Quite a few, because I've been actually into anime since the age of like, I want to say 5, and my first anime was not for kids, not at all. It was an anime called Vampire Hunter D, and it was during the heyday of like the very gory 80s animation style. So things like Fist of the North Star and whatnot came out during that time period. But yeah, I saw that 5 years old.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I always, you know, I mean, probably, you know, I definitely got into it with comic books first.
Yeah.
Stuff like Akira.
That's one of my favorites.
Ghost in the Shell. You know, Katsuhiro Otomo. Yeah, I mean, amazing work. And then Ghost in the Shell, the first time I saw the original one, not the live action one.
Yeah.
I mean, my mind was just completely blown.
And the interesting thing about that art form is that, like, that is a piece of art in and of itself on its own. Like that and Akira, for their time, they're masterpieces. Like I appreciate them for that. There's other anime out there that are just like, I mean, they are what they are. They're made to cater to teens and whatnot, and you know, it's got a lot of action sequences and whatnot. But I wasn't old enough to appreciate Ghost in the Shell when I was younger, because a lot of the concept stuff just went over my head. Studying philosophy and everything now, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So it's one of those things where it's like, as I've matured as a person and my intellect and like as an artist, I have so much more appreciation for the stuff that kind of got me into wanting to do art too. Like, even though I did do a lot of fan art and character art and stuff like that was inspired by this stuff for a long time, Like, I'm not gonna say that it was bad. It's just
Hmm.
that's where my interest lied at the time. But it's funny how things change and develop.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And how, like, I mean, anime and manga and stuff like that, it's slowly crept into mainstream Western culture,
Oh yeah.
now with Ghost in the Shell being remade
Mm-hmm.
as like a major cinematic release. And, and this is something that was like fringe, years ago, or at least like for Westerners, pretty fringe, you
You
know what
couldn't
I
even
mean?
get most anime, and like you couldn't go to the store and get it. Like there was like
Hmm.
one or two businesses that actually sold anime to the and manga for that matter.
Hmm.
Um, Places like Suncoast, which I don't even think Suncoast exists anymore, but there was only like a handful of shops, and they were like really small shops that sporadically found with bad subtitles and all sorts of stuff,
Right.
because this was before they were dubbed and all like. But yeah,
Hmm.
I remember those days.
Right on. Well, do you want to show, I guess, do you want to show some more of your work as far as how your work has sort of evolved a little bit? I don't know if you want to pull up anything off of your site, um,
Yeah,
to for us
I
to
actually,
see.
yeah, I actually have a tab open with I made a new grouping on my website just for the occasion, to kind of showcase just how things have changed with my art style.
Gotcha.
Um,
Do you want to just let the audience know your URL so people can look you up?
yes, so you can find all of my artwork, or majority of it now because I haven't uploaded some of it yet. But the majority of my artwork is at www.davobradleyart.net. My Instagram is also Davo Bradley Art. My Facebook is Davo Bradley Art. My Twitter, which I made before, is just B Devonte. So it's the letter B and then Davonte. But this is kind of a rough snapshot of just how much my style has changed and progressed in a short period of time. This is, if it lets opens up. This piece is entitled Depression, which after losing my job and or anything like that, like I was kind of feeling very lost. Please load. There we go. So there's I was still in the mode of trying to reproduce some of the work that I had made as a child in MS Paint. And what I did with MS Paint was there was a lot of works that I made that were literally pitch black backgrounds and geometric shapes on top. So that was kind of the effect that I was going for with this. Red being more associated with like uh, also anger, but also sadness at the same time. So I was going for with that. And some painterly strokes.
Hmm.
Then there was the next one, which came a few weeks later, called Tied Down, which was inspired from, at the time, it was a very tumultuous time with my mom. The year prior, I'd actually dealt with my mom being suicidal and also extremely like paranoid. And I was on the phone with her constantly, like trying to bring her back to like sanity. And like I kind of have a not necessarily strained, but my family does at times feel like it's like the status of my family has changed to me in a lot of ways. And so the kind of struggle from that manifested in this.
Hmm.
That's definitely
So, do you produce these? I guess this site allows people to have these produced like in various sizes and on
right.
different substrates.
Yep.
And then some of your work you release as singular pieces as well, right?
Correct. Yes. This one is I used a mirroring technique, and this is actually those same brushes I demonstrated before, the chrome ink pens, but smaller, like what they were before,
Mm.
um, to create this effect. And this one, I wasn't really. I don't think there was too much of any emotion behind this one. This was just one of those things where I just want to make something that looks cool. And I have, like, in front of my, right behind my main monitor here, I have comic books of Carnage and Venom, which are kind of two of my favorite sets of villain anti-hero sets in the Marvel universe. So I kind of incorporated those red wispy lines. That's kind of from Carnage's design, because he's red all over and got tentacles and whatnot and everything. That's kind of where that came from. And also kind of where the title came from, called Utter Chaos, because that character is chaotic as all hell. And there's this one. You'll also notice like some of the titles for these might not make a whole lot of sense. And that's, they make sense to me. This one, I was listening to a song where one of the lyrics was that the person failed the test. And I think I had that song on repeat while I was making this one. So that's where the title came from. And I was experimenting with another brush to see how that would work. This is before I had settled on the Chroma ink pen as my primary tool.
Gotcha. So when you create work, do you like set the canvas size to start so that that's like the biggest that you can produce the work at, like with a certain resolution, or how do you go about that from sort of like a technical standpoint?
From a technical standpoint, like I, at the time of creating a lot of these at the start, I didn't necessarily have the intention of making them as prints at the time. What happened was there was interest that was shown for me to produce these as prints, and I had already been kind of playing with that idea anyway. So the initial dimensions that a lot of these older works were, they were at kind of awkward aspect ratios. They were consistent, but they were kind of at awkward aspect ratios. And I kind of had to go back on quite a few of them and adjust their aspect ratios after the fact. And I had, a lot of them were a lot smaller than I thought they were going to end up as. So I had to make them bigger. But in the process of making them bigger, I didn't actually lose a whole lot of visual fidelity in that process. Mm-hmm. And even if I did, I don't think I would have been all that like upset about fidelity. I mean, it's abstract work. Like if there's going to be like little artifacts and stuff in it, I think that'd be fine. It'd be like an unintentional effect. But it's not going to like mess.
I know programmers say it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Correct. Right. So I was completely okay with that. Like if things got stretched too big and things started to look a little fuzzy, that's fine. It's okay. This work is, this one in particular, I have a little bit to say about this one. So this one is actually the second iteration of a work from the first series that I did entitled The Family Series. The Family Series was about essentially what my observations were about the emotional states of my immediate family members throughout the entire period of me growing up. So there was a piece entitled The Father's Anger, or Father's Rage, the Mother's Anguish, the Brother's Frustration, the Sister's Madness. And then after all of those, there was a piece called Generational Trauma, where, how best to describe? This central figure here is more or less supposed to be interpreted as like a family tree. And all this red, all of this like almost looking like blood that's coming off of it is supposed to be representational of like just the fact that the tree is hurt. Like there's a lot of pain in that tree and it gets passed down as far as all the way down to the roots. Like you can't, but it's also the case that there's still liveliness there. That's the blue, the greens here. Like despite all of that pain, there's still life there. There's still something good that's happening, despite
Mhm.
all of the chaotic nature of.
I mean, did you preconceive these ideas and then draw it, or was this just kind of like coming out of you, and then as you're making it, you're realizing like, oh, like that's kind of like what that is, or
This one was preconceived. This is one of the few
Mhm.
that was actually preconceived. So,
Mhm.
most of them aren't. Most of them are just me having like a vague idea of what I think might be. How do I how do I describe it? No, I can use this one. Um, some of them are like this one where I knew what I kind of wanted to depict, as in there's a central idea of hope, right? And in my mind, I envisioned hope as something that's like spherical, the circle, because completeness and that kind of idea. And I was like, well, what colors are kind of associated with hope? Maybe blue, maybe purple, maybe. And then that's kind of where like these fuzzy ideas of how I kind of envision these ideas and kind of trying to make that visual. So that's how
Gotcha.
a lot of my work happens.
Nice, nice. And in terms of what you're working on now, I know I think I saw that you had put up an NFT recently, right? On
Yes.
Rarible.
Yes.
You wanna show it, pull that up, and just speak a little bit about like what that's all about?
Yes, actually, hold on.
It's on the site too, right? On Rarible.
It's on Rarible. It's not on my actual website, but it is on Rarible.
Yeah, I think I saw it on there because I saw Um, maybe you shared on Discord that you had gotten
Yeah,
verified. Then I went and checked your profile and I saw it on there. I was like, nice.
yeah, yeah. So this was uh I noticed that on the platform that there's a lot of art that is kind of about the fact that it's crypto art or that's about
Mhm.
cryptocurrencies. So I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like,
Like referencing Bitcoin or
right,
Ethereum in the imagery.
right. So that's where this kind of came from, because if uh, this structure here, this shape, actually is inspired by the shape of the actual Ethereum icon, like that
Mhm.
little symbol that's associated with Ethereum. And I actually, this is a font I created. I
Oh,
actually
nice.
created my own font. Yeah. Um, I've started using that. And then this figure here is kind of like my mark of, I guess it's almost like a signature for me now. I started using it a while ago, and the first time I used it, I was like, oh, that's just like a nice little effect that I added onto one of my works. But now it's become something more, and I kind of see it now as like my own personal like eye of truth, and like kind of similar to like the Egyptian Waja, kind of.
Mhm.
And that like one of the main things about me as a person is that I'm always kind of watching, always observing, always making a note of everything that's around me. And the structure here is kind of the embodiment of that at this point for me. So I've started to include it in a lot more of my work, so that also as a way to say like, you might be looking at this, but I'm also looking at you.
Gotcha. Could you show us how we would find you on Rarible?
I'm on Rarible. I think I should be under Dalvo Bradley art there too. I think. I think that's how I said. No, hold on. Yes. Yeah. So under Rarible, I am under Dalvo Bradley art. It's
Gotcha.
shorten it to Dalvo Brad for whatever reason. Okay, that's weird. But yeah, if you look the link here, it's
Gotcha.
app.rarible.com/Dalvo Bradley art. I don't have
Nice.
too much on here because It's just I didn't realize that the cost associated with actually minting work. So if you're going
Yeah, Ethereum definitely in the last couple of weeks has really risen, and I think that
yeah,
those gas prices, quote unquote, or what it costs to mint things have really jumped as a
yeah,
result as well. I know I was talking to Ann Spalter about that recently, and she's on a bunch of these different, NFT platforms. She mentioned one called Viv3 that I guess is a little less expensive to make things on. I think they use a different cryptocurrency, like it's based on Ethereum, but it's called Flow. I think a lot of these different platforms use sort of their own like homegrown sort of cryptocurrency that is like you start with Ethereum and then convert it to like I guess Rarible uses Rari, which is its like own
yeah. They have
thing,
their own
right?
tokens. Yeah.
Right. So it's definitely a whole new world to get into, and pretty interesting. And then just to sort of wrap it up, like what are your thoughts, in general on sort of like the future of art? Where do you see, art in general going, as we move ahead?
Uh, I think that for one, the museum and gallery space and just the gatekeeping that has been associated with digital art, that's going to go away. Like that's just it's they're going to figure out, or they're going to be forced to figure out in some cases, how to accommodate and show digital art, digital fine art. Like I think there are some places that are already trying to adapt where they're like installing projectors and they have VR headsets and that kind of stuff. I think that's going to become more the norm instead of just one museum here, one gallery here has these things. That's going to become a lot more normalized. As VR technology advances too, I think naturally, because digital art itself has advanced a great deal, but as VR technology advances, that's also going to open up um, a lot more space for consuming, appreciating, and even buying art. Because with the VR technology, you it is quite possible now to you can operate a business virtually in a VR space. Like that is the thing that you can do now. So you could have a virtual digital art gallery that people can visit and buy art from.
Hmm.
That is something that can happen. And you
Yeah,
can
I
add
think
it to
there
your
are a
digital art.
few
Yeah.
virtual spaces now. Like I know there's this museum of crypto art that I think is actually something that you can experience in VR, and move around in. And there's a few other ones too that are sort of virtual art spaces,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting. And the whole NFT phenomenon, to me, it's it's really, an entire new market, and it's an entire new set of artists that are much more closely related to street art in
Mm-hmm.
culturally in many ways. To
Yeah.
me, in the way that I see it is that, people are using sort of pseudonyms. I mean, one of the NFT artists that's really like trending lately is someone called Pranksy, which obviously is a
Banksy.
pretty much like Banksy, but it's
Right.
it's a prankster, sort
Right.
of um, riffing on that idea. And like I think that, you know, monetization and commerce are what create art history in a lot of ways. It's like what makes things, end up in the art history books. It's that they're commodified, they're passed down from collector to institution, you know what I mean? And that aspect of things, whether people like it or not. And I know, like, when I was younger as an artist, I was like, well, that's BS. It's all about, blah, blah, blah. No,
Right.
really, that's just the way it is, you
Yeah.
know? So it's
And
interesting, though, to see like stuff like crypto art. It
yeah.
allows artists to empower themselves in a way that is outside of the traditional system.
And the other interesting thing too to note is that like just like in the like traditional art world where works will eventually over time they will accumulate value if they are perceived as valuable as they're passing hands or whatever. Like
Hmm.
something that sold for $3,000 could later end up selling for 1 million. That is a thing that
Right.
has happened multiple times.
Hmm. And especially when it's a public, like public transaction, like an
Right.
auction, where it's like I remember there was an artist. I did a bunch of work years ago with this video artist Frank Gillette, and he wanted to learn Photoshop. He was like kind of made his claim to fame in the 70s as like one of the seminal sort of video artists, and made all these crazy Zen videos of like with like VHS and beta, or even maybe before that, taking these like hours long videos of like a running stream and stuff. And
Hmm.
he actually like introduced me to like William Gibson and cyberpunk um, literature, like
Hmm.
Neuromancer and stuff. But one thing that he said to me, and it always sticks with me about the art world or the art industry or whatever you want to call it, is he said, consensus is king.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll never forget that, because it's like if enough people just have this same perception about whatever it is, that's truth. You know what I mean? And like look at today's media and the way that
Oh
that's,
yeah.
manifesting itself
Yeah.
in that way, so yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I think that you're right. It's things are moving in a direction where the art world and the art industry in general is catching up to the rest of our culture, where technology is a given.
Yep.
People are just, oh wow, like virtual art. It's like, well, gamers have been using headsets for a pretty long time now.
Right.
And same thing with things like streaming, like Twitch and whatever else. It's like mass culture precedes, you know, fine art, because like fine art is like the individual's personal experience then manifested back out as objects or as
Right.
artists art, but it's really, what are they taking in? It's like our culture, like moving through time in our culture, which is a technology based culture.
Yep.
um but definitely, like, I feel like working and interacting with people like yourself that are like, a younger generation. It's like, oh, like you know this is what the people are doing now. Like they're
And it's
streaming art experiences on Twitch. Like I'm
right.
like, wow, that's pretty
But it's
interesting.
it's also it's like it's also weird and interesting at the same time because like as far as I'm concerned, I'm not even like at the cutting edge stuff. Like I'm actually pretty low like as far as adapting to like recent changes in that space. I'm really far behind. Like I'm at this end. There's other people that are like way out there in what they're doing and what they're working on. I'm just like, how?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's I don't know, but because things move so rapidly and so fast, like because I mean I was born in the 90s, grew up in 2000s, the age of the internet. Like I was one of the first generations that grew up with the internet. And just to see how rapidly communication is changing, art is changing, technology within that little cosm is changing. It's like I there's people that have made whole art experiences with platforms like Unity and Unreal, which were made for video games, but now they're making art out of it. But the art is also almost like a game. That's also an interesting. It's in me. I'm here. What I'm doing, I think, is pretty basic. Like personally speaking, I think what I'm doing is basic because what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do is all I like. I'm just trying to make art that it's you'd have to wonder whether or not that was painted in reality or if somebody took a snapshot of that, like a really high quality snapshot of a painting. Like that's kind of the effect that I'm going for. Like I want, and I've actually had that effect several times. It's like, did you paint this? I was like, no, just this was on my computer. Like, this is something that I created on my computer. And like, really? And I'm cool with that. I'm fine with that. But then there's other people who are just taking a step further. It's like they're really pushing the envelope of what the technology is capable of and what kinds of things you can accomplish. And that's a whole other world that it's not inaccessible, but the learning curve is steep. Like, it's really steep. And I respect the people that are hopping into that foray like with both feet and just like they're just creating stuff. And it's still very much in its early form for what it is, but like they're doing amazing stuff. Very amazing stuff. Way more technically minded than what I'm currently making. But I respect it, and I hope it becomes something even greater than what they think it's probably going to be. Like, I just I can't wait to see what computer-based art or art that's solely on the computer or solely created in a virtual space. I'm very much looking forward to how that looks in at least like even 10 years from now. Like when I'm pushing 40, I want to know what that looks like. I'm definitely
Totally.
going
I
to be
mean, I
around.
recently had my first experience with like VR with an Oculus headset, and I mean, it definitely blew my mind,
Hmm.
and it's interesting to see that content is being created both by major studios like, the whole Star Wars franchise. There's all these VR games and stuff. I'm a Star Wars fanatic, so that was
Yeah.
one of the first things I got was like one of the Vader games
Hmm.
using a lightsaber, all this stuff. But then on the flip side, there's content that's being created by individual artists
Hmm.
that's also available as VR experiences, and I think that that's pretty cool and that's interesting. I mean, there's definitely a smaller base of consumers of that sort of content than say your standard sort of visual art, but just the fact that people are working in that way, I think people are discovering things.
And one of the things that I'm very much interested in and the potential implications of, because I always think about implications of things. One, there is currently a project that's going on now where these developers are actually trying to create tactile experiences within VR spaces. So like you will actually be able to feel things on your
Mm.
hands and on your fingers
Mhm.
as you're interacting stuff in a virtual space. So I'm just like, that's gonna be interesting.
Mhm. Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's interesting. That's really wild.
yeah.
Um, I mean, just the other day I was looking through some some something on YouTube, and I saw like another suggested video come up about like a VR controller that basically you can like clip it onto the back of a baseball cap or onto the back of a VR headset strap where it like
Hmm.
actually reads your brain waves. And like the guy was demoing this. I mean, and I mean, I believe, I don't know if it's out now, and I forget the name of the product. It was like Neuralink or something like that, where he was literally like controlling things on the screen by focusing on it. And there weren't like external eye tracker mechanisms, like it was connected to the back of his head. And I was just like, man, this is crazy. This is really crazy. Um, but 21st century.
We're gonna be definitely in for some wild times, that's for sure.
Right on, right on. Well,
Yeah.
do you have anything you want to add to sort of wrap things up, or it's been a great interview?
It's been a long interview, it looks like.
Yeah, it has. We probably went over the fake allotted amount of time, but if anyone's
Yeah.
stuck with us the whole time, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Me running my mouth off as I am want to do these days.
Well, it was cool. It was a little bit more like a conversation than some of
Yeah.
the past interviews, so it's good stuff. you know, and yeah, appreciate, you know, your involvement in the project, and definitely look forward to seeing some more of your work and maybe swapping some with you in the near future.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, and the collab project that's, you know, coming along,
Mhm.
that's going to be cool. You know, that'll be our first real group show, you know, within
Yep.
VR. So I'm excited to see how that all comes together on Kunstmatrix. So
Yeah. All right.
all right. Well, thank
Well,
you, Davo. I appreciate your time.
thank you. Appreciate the interview.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Signing off.